The night I bought my first home. I thought I had finally escaped my family's shadow. But 5 years later, they showed up at my door. Not with congratulations but with demands. They wanted me to sell the house I built with my own hands, to pay off my sister's $260,000 debt. And when I said no, what happened next turned into the most shocking betrayal I've ever faced. The night was quiet when Sarah heard the knock. She opened the door, and there stood her parents with Lami by their side. For a moment, her heart jumped, thinking maybe they had finally come to see her with love after so many years. But the way they looked at her told a different story. There were no smiles, no warmth, only cold eyes that carried demands. Her mother stepped forward first, her voice sharp, saying they had not come for greetings. They wanted her to sell her house, the house she had worked day and night to build, the one that carried all her struggles and victories. She stood frozen, her hands still on the doorknob, wondering if she had heard right. Lami stepped in with fake tears, holding her parents' hands tightly. She said she was drowning in debt, a huge amount she could never pay alone. She begged her sister to help, her voice breaking as if she truly cared. But deep down, Sarah remembered all the times Lami had been spoiled while she was left with nothing. Still, she listened quietly, hoping her parents might say something kind, maybe even acknowledge her sacrifices. But instead, her father's words cut through her chest. He told her this was her duty as a daughter, that family comes before everything else. Sarah's mind rushed back to the night years ago when they had pushed her out, saying she was no longer their child. She remembered the cold streets, the hunger, the nights she cried herself to sleep with nowhere to go. That house she now stood in was her proof that she had survived it all. And now the same people who abandoned her were standing in her living room, telling her to give it up for the very sister they had always chosen over her. Her voice trembled as she asked why it had to be her. Why Lami's mistakes were suddenly her responsibility. Her mother's eyes hardened, and she said simply because Sarah had something worth taking. Lami clutched her arm, pretending to be weak, whispering that she would be ruined without her help. But Sarah saw through the act. This was not about saving a sister. This was about taking away the one thing she had left for herself. The silence in the room grew heavy, broken only by the ticking of the clock. Sarah looked at each of them, her heart breaking but her spirit still strong. She realized at that moment that their visit was not about family or love. It was only about what they could get from her. The knock at her door that night was not a reunion. It was the start of another betrayal, one that threatened to take away everything she had fought so hard to build. Lami fell to her knees in front of Sarah, her tears streaming down as if the world was about to end. She grabbed Sarah's hands tightly, shaking them, begging her not to let her life collapse. Her voice cracked as she cried that the debt collectors were after her, that she would lose everything if Sarah didn't step in. She painted herself as the helpless sister, the one who had no strength to fight alone. Every word was soaked in desperation, but behind those tears, Sarah could sense the same selfishness that had always been there. Her parents stood close, watching Lami's act, and instead of comforting Sarah or asking kindly, they stepped in with sharp words. Her mother said coldly that family must stand together, and if Sarah truly cared, she would not hesitate to sell the house. Her father leaned forward, his tone heavy, and warned her that refusing meant cutting herself away from the family completely. Family comes first, unless you're no longer family, he said, his words slicing through her heart like a blade. Those words dragged Sarah back to the past, to the years she had been treated like a stranger in her own home. She remembered how they had given Lami everything, money, clothes, love, while she was left in the shadows. She had been the one ignored at dinner tables, the one blamed for mistakes she never made, the one thrown out when she finally spoke up. And now, standing in her own living room, she was hearing the same rejection dressed in new clothes. The threat of disownment was nothing new, but it still burned deep. Lami clung tighter, sobbing louder, saying she would die if her sister didn't help her. She reminded Sarah of childhood moments when they had laughed together, twisting memories into weapons. But Sarah knew the truth. Those moments had always been rare, and they had always ended with her being pushed aside so Lami could shine. Still, hearing her parents stand behind Lami, demanding and threatening, made Sarah's chest heavy. She looked into their faces, searching for even a small sign of care, but all she saw was greed and pressure. Her mother crossed her arms, her voice sharp, warning that people would talk about how ungrateful Sira had become if she refused. Her father added that they would no longer see her as their child if she didn't save her sister. Each word pressed down on her spirit, trying to break her into pieces. But inside, a fire began to burn. She realized they were not here for her, not here because they loved her. They were only here for what she had. In that moment, Sira felt the weight of all the years of neglect, the loneliness, the tears she had cried alone. Their threats were meant to cage her again, but instead, they awakened her strength. She saw clearly now that their love was only given when it served their needs, and this time, she refused to let their threats define her worth. Sira stood frozen as her parents' words echoed in her ears, and her mind drifted back to the night that had changed her life forever. It was 5 years ago, a night that felt like yesterday because the wound had never healed. She remembered sitting in the small living room of their old house, clutching her school bag, and trying to explain to her parents that she had been offered a small job after graduation, a chance to start building her life. She was excited, hoping they would finally be proud of her. But instead of support, she was met with anger. Her father shouted that she was wasting her time, that she would never amount to anything. Her mother turned to Lami with a smile, praising her beauty, reminding everyone that Lami deserved their money and attention because she was the daughter who could bring honor to the family. That night, the argument grew hotter. Sira begged them just to believe in her, to give her a little chance. But her mother's face was cold, her father's voice was sharp, and Lami smirked quietly from the corner, knowing the spotlight was hers. Finally, her father pointed to the door and said she should leave if she thought she could survive on her own. His exact words carved themselves into her memory. "You are no longer our responsibility. Get out." Her mother didn't stop him. Instead, she nodded in agreement, telling Sira that they only had one daughter worth investing in. And it wasn't her. Sira walked out of that house with nothing but her bag and a heart full of pain. She had no money, no friends to turn to, no place to sleep. That night, she found herself sitting on the cold pavement, hugging her knees as the rain poured down. She cried until her eyes were swollen, not just because she had nowhere to go, but because her own parents had chosen to throw her away like she was nothing. But she didn't give up. She found small jobs, cleaning, typing, waiting tables, anything that would put food in her mouth and keep her moving. She slept on couches, in tiny rooms she could barely afford, sometimes even on floors. Every step was hard, but she carried the pain like fire in her chest, a fire that pushed her to prove them wrong. Slowly, with long nights of work and endless sacrifice, she saved every coin she could. And finally, after years of struggle, she bought her own house. To anyone else, it was just a building, but to Sira, it was everything. It was her proof that she was strong enough to survive the betrayal. Now, standing in that same house, watching her parents and Lami demand she sell it, Sira felt her chest tighten. The very people who had left her homeless now wanted to strip away the one thing that gave her pride and peace. The betrayal of the past and the cruelty of the present collided in her heart, and she knew she was facing a test of strength once again. The gathering was supposed to be a celebration. Relatives from near and far had filled the big hall, laughing, eating, and sharing stories. Sira had not planned to attend, but her parents had insisted, and out of respect, she agreed. She walked in quietly, sitting at a corner table, hoping to avoid attention. For a while, everything seemed normal. Children ran around, uncles told jokes, and aunties discussed marriages and businesses. But then, in the middle of the noise, her father stood up, holding his cup high as if to make an important announcement. Everyone went silent. Sira looked up, confused, as her father's voice carried through the hall. He smiled, but his words were sharp. He said proudly that their daughter Sira was about to prove what true family loyalty meant. He told everyone that she would sell her house to save her sister Lami from her debt. Gasps filled the air, and whispers spread like fire across the room. Heads turned toward Sira, eyes wide with curiosity, some with pity, others with judgment. Her mother stepped forward, placing her hand on Lami's shoulder, and added that this was how sisters should stand for each other. Lami lowered her head, pretending to cry softly, as if the entire story was a tragedy she had no control over. The relatives nodded, some even clapped, saying how blessed it was that one sister would sacrifice so much for the other. Sira's heart pounded. Her lips went dry. She had not been warned about this. It was a trap, carefully set to corner her in front of everyone so she would have no choice but to agree. The weight of all those eyes pressing down on her made her chest tight. She saw cousins whispering behind their hands, aunties shaking their heads as if waiting to see if she would obey. For a moment, she thought of staying silent, of walking out quietly. But something inside her snapped. She remembered the nights she slept on the streets, the hunger she endured, the house she built from sweat and tears. She thought about how her parents had never once stood up for her, never once protected her dignity. And now, they were using this crowd to shame her into giving up everything again. Sira stood slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. The room went even quieter. With a steady voice, she said she was tired of being treated like nothing. She said her house was not built with her parents' help, nor Lami's tears. It was built with her own struggle, and no one had the right to take it away. Her words were clear, strong, and final. The whispers turned louder, but this time they were different. Some people nodded in respect, others stared in shock. Her parents' smiles froze, and Lami's tears stopped instantly. For the first time, Sira was not the quiet daughter who bowed her head. She was the woman who stood boldly, refusing to be manipulated again. Sira thought the humiliation at the family gathering would be the end of it, but she was wrong. Later that evening, as she sat quietly in her living room, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her father, short and cold. "If you don't sell, you'll regret it." She read it again and again, her stomach twisting. She had expected anger from him after her refusal, but she never thought he would go this far. It was no longer just pressure. It was a threat. Her hands shook as she put her phone down. The walls of her house, usually her safe place, suddenly felt smaller, as if danger was pressing in from every corner. She locked her doors and tried to calm herself, convincing her heart that maybe it was only words spoken in frustration. But deep down she knew her parents. They had always found ways to break her spirit when she didn't obey. This time, it seemed they were ready to do more than just speak. The night dragged on, heavy and restless. Around midnight, she heard footsteps outside. At first, she thought it was just the wind or perhaps a passerby, but then came the sound of gravel crunching under heavy boots. Her body stiffened. She moved closer to the window, peeking through the curtain, and her heart sank. There were 3 men standing near her gate. Their faces were shadowed, but their movements were clear. They weren't neighbors or friends. They stood there too still, too deliberate, as if they were waiting for something. One of them stepped forward and rattled the gate violently. Another lit a cigarette, the small flame revealing a smirk on his face. Sira's blood ran cold. She stepped back, holding her breath, terrified that they might try to break in. Her phone felt heavy in her hands, but she was too scared to call anyone. What would she even say? That her own family had sent men to frighten her? Who would believe her? The men stayed for a while, pacing back and forth, their voices low but threatening. She caught fragments of their words. "She'll give in. Just wait. She can't stand it." Each word burned into her ears, confirming her worst fear. They were not random strangers. They had come with a purpose, and that purpose was to break her will. As the minutes stretched, fear mixed with anger. Her chest rose with every breath, and a new thought began to grow inside her. If her own parents could send men to her doorstep to scare her, then there was no limit to how far they would go. They wanted her to believe she was powerless, that she had no choice but to surrender. But standing there, clutching the edge of her curtain, Sira made a quiet promise to herself. She would not let them win. The men eventually left, their footsteps fading into the night, but the damage was already done. Sira understood now that her parents and Lami were willing to destroy her peace, her safety, and even her dignity just to get what they wanted. The cruel ultimatum was not just words. It was a war declared against her. And in that moment, fear no longer ruled her. Fury did. The next morning, Sira woke up with her mind heavy from the night before. She could not shake the feeling that something deeper was happening. Something beyond Lami's debt, her parents' urgency, the threats, the strange men outside. None of it felt like a simple plea for help. She decided to dig for answers. If they wanted her house so badly, there had to be a reason bigger than what they had told her. She started with her own papers. Sira pulled out the small metal box where she kept all her important documents, her house deed, bank statements, and old receipts. She carefully went through them one by one, hoping to find something unusual. At first, everything looked normal, until she saw a letter tucked behind her property papers. It was a notice from a bank she had never borrowed from, dated years ago. Her eyes widened as she read it. The letter stated that Miss Sarah was listed as a guarantor for a loan taken out long ago. Confused, she flipped through more papers and found another, and then another. Each one carried her name, her details, her signature. But the signatures were not hers. Her hands shook as she held the papers close. She had never signed these documents, never even seen them before. A sick feeling settled in her stomach as the truth unfolded. Her parents had used her name behind her back. They had forged her signature and taken loans in her identity years ago, when she was too young to notice or understand. She was shocked to see that the debts were huge, far bigger than anything she could imagine. Piece by piece, it all began to make sense. The sudden pressure for her to sell her house, the way her father's voice carried threats, the presence of those strange men. It was all connected. The house was not just about Lami's debt. It was about covering up years of lies and fraud. Her parents had tied her name to debts without her consent, and now, with collectors probably closing in, they wanted to use her house as payment. Sarah sat down heavily, her breath uneven, her heart pounding. She felt betrayed all over again, not just by neglect, but by deception. They had not only abandoned her years ago, but had also secretly chained her to their mistakes. Every sacrifice she had made, every coin she saved, had been under a shadow she never knew existed. Tears filled her eyes, but anger soon dried them. She could no longer see her parents as careless or misguided. This was deliberate. They had planned to strip her of everything, even the one thing she had built from nothing. For years, she had carried the pain of being unloved. Now she carried the pain of being used. Clutching the forged documents in her hands, Sarah knew she had uncovered the real reason behind it all. Her house wasn't just a symbol of survival anymore. It had become the target of a cruel scheme. And for the first time, she realized the fight was not just about keeping her home. It was about reclaiming her very identity. Sarah sat in her living room, the forged documents spread across her table, her head in her hands. She felt trapped, unsure of what to do next. The debts tied to her name were overwhelming, and the more she thought about it, the more powerless she felt. She wanted to fight back, but she had no idea where to even begin. Just when despair was swallowing her, fate brought someone back into her life, Zoma, her childhood friend. They had grown up in the same neighborhood, running through dusty streets and sharing dreams about the future. But when Sarah was cast out by her parents years ago, they lost contact. Now by chance Zoma spotted her one afternoon at a small shop. He was surprised to see her but even more shocked by the tired look in her eyes. He asked how she had been, and at first, Sarah hesitated. She had carried her pain alone for so long that she didn't know how to share it. But something in Zoma's voice felt safe, and slowly, she told him everything, about her parents, Lami's debt, the threats, and finally, the documents she had discovered. Zoma listened carefully, his face growing more serious with every word. Unlike most people, he didn't dismiss her story or tell her to give up. Instead, he leaned closer and said she wasn't as powerless as she thought. Over the years, Zoma had studied law and finance, building a career helping people escape from traps like the one Sarah was caught in. He told her he could help her untangle the mess. For the first time in days, Sarah felt a small flicker of hope. She invited him to her home and laid out all the documents. Zoma went through them one by one, his sharp eyes catching details she had missed. He explained how her parents had forged her signature, how the banks had failed to verify properly, and how much danger she was truly in if she didn't act fast. He showed her that these debts weren't just Lami's problem. They were tied directly to her future, her house, even her freedom. Each word hit Sarah like a new wave of betrayal. Her family had not only abandoned her emotionally, but had used her name to carry their burdens, making her a shield for their selfishness. She realized now that every smile they showed in public was built on lies, and every threat they made was to protect the truth from spilling out. Zoma promised to stand with her. He said they would gather evidence, track the forged loans, and prepare to confront her parents with proof. His calm confidence gave Sarah strength she didn't know she still had. For years she had fought alone, but now she wasn't alone anymore. Looking at Zoma, Sarah felt a new determination rise in her heart. Her family had tried to trap her, but with his help, She finally saw a way to fight back and reclaim the life they had tried so hard to destroy. The day of the meeting arrived, and Sira's heart pounded with both fear and strength. She had asked her parents and Lami to come, but she made sure it would not just be them. She invited extended relatives too, uncles, aunties, cousins. The very people her parents always tried to impress with their image of being a perfect, united family. The hall was full of chatter as everyone gathered, curious about why Sira had called them together. Her parents walked in with confident smiles, certain they could twist the story as they always did. Lami followed, her face pale but still pretending to be the victim in need of saving. When the room settled, Sira stood up. Her voice shook at first, but then it grew steady as she began. She spoke about the years of neglect, about how she had been cast out while all love and wealth were poured into Lami. Her parents shifted uncomfortably, trying to silence her with sharp looks, but this time she didn't stop. Then she pulled out the stack of documents and held them high for everyone to see. The relatives leaned forward, whispering to one another. Sira laid the papers on the table. Loan agreements, forged signatures, false guarantees. She explained how her parents had secretly used her name to take out loans without her consent, how they had tied her future to debts she never even knew existed. Gasps filled the room as she spoke, and the whispers turned into shocked murmurs. Faces that once looked at her with pity now looked at her parents with disbelief. Her father's face darkened. He tried to stand, raising his voice, saying Sira was lying, that she was ungrateful and twisting the truth to shame them. But Zoma, standing quietly beside her, spoke up and pointed out the legal details, the mismatched signatures, the dates that proved Sira had not been involved. Her mother tried to cry, pretending Sira was destroying the family for revenge, but the weight of evidence was too heavy. Finally, Sira turned to Lami. She looked her sister in the eyes and asked why she had allowed all this to happen, why she had watched their parents destroy her life just so she could live in comfort. Lami's lips trembled, but no words came out. She lowered her head in silence, unable to deny the truth. The room erupted. Relatives stood up, voices rising, accusing the parents of betrayal, calling them out for years of deceit. The perfect family, mask they had worn for so long, shattered before everyone's eyes. For once, Sira was not the one judged, her parents were. Sira's chest rose with relief. She had carried the truth alone for years, but now it was no longer hidden. The lies were out in the open, and the power her parents once held over her was gone. They could no longer control her with threats or shame. In front of everyone, she had taken her voice back. Her mother's face turned hard, her eyes sharp like knives. Everyone in the room was waiting for her to say something after Sira exposed the truth, but instead of showing regret, she leaned forward and spat words that cut deeper than anything Sira had ever heard. "You were never the daughter we wanted," she said coldly, each word like poison. The room went silent. Even Lami looked shocked, as if she couldn't believe their mother had gone that far. For a moment, Sira felt her heart freeze. These were the parents she had worked so hard to please, the people she sacrificed everything for, and now they stood there admitting they never wanted her at all. Her chest felt heavy, but something inside her shifted. This time no tears came. In the past, she would have broken down, begged for their love, or tried to prove her worth, but not anymore. She stood taller, her hands holding the documents that revealed years of betrayal. She looked at them, her father with his head low, her mother with her cruel words still hanging in the air, and Lami who now avoided her eyes. And in that silence, Sira realized the truth. She had already lost them long ago. A calm strength filled her, the kind that comes when pain finally runs dry. She didn't scream or argue. She didn't need to. Their actions had spoken louder than any words. Instead, she took a deep breath, her voice steady, and said, "If that is how you feel, then this is the last time you'll ever see me." Her words shocked the relatives in the room. Some gasped, others whispered to each other, but Sira didn't care. She wasn't speaking for them. She was speaking for herself. Her mother's face twisted with anger, but Sira no longer cared. For the first time in her life, their disapproval didn't crush her. She turned, walked past them, and headed for the door. Each step felt heavy, but it was also freeing. Behind her, the house that once held all her childhood memories now felt like a prison, and she was finally walking out of it. She could hear her relatives murmuring, some even scolding her parents for their cruelty, but Sira didn't stop to listen. As she stepped outside, the air felt different. It was like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. For the first time, she wasn't carrying their expectations, their lies, or their hatred. She was carrying only herself, stronger, free. She didn't look back, not even once. Inside, her family was left to face the shame and whispers of their relatives. The perfect image they had tried to protect now shattered forever. And Sira? She walked away, not broken but rebuilt, finally ready to live her life on her own terms, no longer chained by people who never saw her worth. Sira stood at the doorway of her own house, the house they had tried so hard to take from her, and felt a calm she had never known before. It wasn't just a building of bricks and walls anymore. It was proof that she had survived everything thrown at her. For years, she had lived under their control, bending to every demand, hoping to be loved the way a daughter should be. But now, she realized she didn't need their approval to breathe, to smile, to live. She kept her house, her dignity, and most importantly, her peace. Meanwhile, life began to show her parents and Lami the cost of their choices. Lami's debt only grew heavier, dragging her into the same darkness she had once tried to throw on Sira. The lenders no longer looked to Sira. They went after the real debtor. Her parents, who once boasted of being respected in the community, slowly lost their influence. Relatives whispered about the lies that had been uncovered, about the daughter they betrayed for greed. Every gathering became a reminder of the shame they had brought upon themselves. Sira, on the other hand, rose higher with each passing day. With Zoma's guidance and her own strength, she started building a life that was hers alone. She surrounded herself with people who genuinely cared for her, friends who celebrated her wins, mentors who guided her, and a community that respected her courage. She learned how to smile without fear of being mocked, how to rest without guilt, how to dream without limits. Her heart healed, slowly but surely, in the quiet freedom of a life she chose for herself. There were moments when memories stung. Her mother's words, the betrayal she uncovered, the coldness she faced from the people who were supposed to protect her. But each time, she reminded herself, walking away wasn't her loss, it was her salvation. They had lost her, not the other way around. In the end, Sira didn't just walk away with her house. She walked away whole. Her story became a quiet example to others, proof that sometimes, the family you're born into isn't the family that keeps you safe. Sometimes, the only way to find yourself is to let go of those who break you. Her parents sat in the silence of their shame, Lami wrestled with the weight of her debts, and the once perfect family stood in ruins. But Sira? She was free, living, laughing, and loving without chains. And in that freedom, she finally found the one thing she had always searched for. Herself. That if Sira's story touched you, remember this. Walking away from toxic people is not weakness, it's strength. Broken heart, right arrow, flexed biceps. Would you have had the courage to do what she did? Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. Speech balloon comment freedom. If you believe peace is worth more than family approval. Backhand index pointing right. Don't forget to follow for more powerful life-changing stories.